Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. This is episode 13. Here we get to test the all-new Harbor Freight right angle impact wrench that we showed torn down in its last video at the top of your screen. We're going to throw it on our dyno, see what power it makes, and test it alongside this Astro 1832 Nano right angle air impact. Then at the end of this episode, rank them based on their performance and specs. On this channel we test modern impact wrenches versus old school torque ratings. Essentially, assuming your father's impact was rated at an honest 450 foot-pounds, what do modern impact wrenches really make compared to that? Manufacturers admit there's currently no way to compare torque ratings, so in a world where brands are now advertising 1600 foot-pounds, this is our attempt at leveling the playing field. It won't disprove the brand's ratings, but it should allow us to actually compare power levels across brands. If you're curious how this testing rig was made, or the airlines, air fittings, air pressure we use, please see episode 1 where that's discussed. In our last video, we asked you what tool we should use to compare performance to on this EQ12RA earthquake. Pretty much unanimously, you said this Astro 1832 Nano right angle. Now, admittedly, we actually had already performed the testing you will see here on the Harbor Freight before we took it apart, so as to not influence the results. But we never really used one of these right angle impacts before. We don't know what kind of power we should expect. 200 foot-pounds, 300, 400. That's why we asked you to recommend a tool for comparison, which we'll use today to show their differences. And it's a good choice too, we think. The 1832 advertises 415 foot-pounds max torque and 300 foot-pounds working torque, which matches the 400-300 of the earthquake almost perfectly. Also, it's oddly one of the few right angle impacts on Amazon with favorable reviews. Pretty similar in price as well, with the earthquake being a little bit more. When it comes to size, the Nano earns its name yet again at 3.46 inches long, and the Harbor Freight being only a hair longer due to its boot that's included. The Astro is a bit longer in length in the hand, which is nice for sticking it into tight spots, and its exhaust, while similar to the Earthquake, swivels, so you can point it where you want, which is, I think, a nice touch. Although the trigger on the Earthquake looks and feels nicer in the hand, however. Getting into the testing, this is working torque with the Harbor Freight first and the Astro second. So yeah, a bit of a difference already. Pay attention to just how each impact sounds in this next max torque test. So with one more test to go, it's not looking great for the Harbor Freight. The 1832 takes an early lead and keeps it all the way through. On this 10-second test, making 291 foot-pounds compared to the Earthquake's 220, which is a pretty big gap in foot-pounds and in percentage. We have one more shot for this Earthquake, which is a best-case scenario test at higher pressure. Let's see how it does. So let's face it, this is a huge gap. The 340 foot-pounds that the 1832 ends up at is just about 100 foot-pounds more than the Harbor Freight. We just finished an episode on the planet's most powerful air impact where the new Matco made 100 foot-pounds more than the previous model, and that was at around 800 foot-pounds, and that seems significant. This is 100 foot-pounds at the 200 and 300 foot-pound mark, which is like 30% difference. So there's a big difference in performance that you can feel, see, hear, and experience on the Bolt. Just for comparison, here is a 5-second forward working torque on the 1832 versus the 15-second best case scenario test of the Harbor Freight. So it takes about 15 seconds at a higher pressure for the Harbor Freight to make the same power as the 1832 at 5 seconds. So just based on this so far, it doesn't seem like the Harbor Freight EQ12RA compares directly to 1832, even though their specs and size match. The Harbor Freight's more equivalent to the Gen 3 compact shown here, which is the tiny Milwaukee M18. Following a similar curve, but up to 15 seconds, the Milwaukee actually still makes more power, which means, unfortunately, this new Harbor Freight Earthquake is the least powerful impact we've tested on this channel. So let's see what this looks like when it's put down in numbers in our ranking system. So this is our first right angle impact, so this is starting out the list new. We have the Astro on top, the Harbor Freight on bottom. The power it made in each of the 3 tests gets turned into points, so that's 23, 29, 34 for the Astro, 17, 22, and 25. Much lower numbers for the Harbor Freight in this case. Then you have power per inch, which is a tiny bit shorter on the Astro's case, so that gets it 98.3 and 70 points for the Harbor Freight. Then how close they are to their torque claim. The Astro made more power, but it advertised a little bit higher. That leaves it 82 points. And the Harbor Freight made less power, so it gets 61, so 61% of its torque claim. Then you have cost per power, cost per foot-pound. That's 56.6 points for the Astro and a low 28.3, the lowest we've had so far for the Harbor Freight. So out of a theoretical 500, and that's for a full-size impact wrench, not necessarily a right angle, we're not sure. The Astro makes 322.9 points and the Harbor Freight 223.3. If you have other right angle impact wrenches you want us to test, perhaps a cordless in the Milwaukee or another air, let us know in the comments, and hopefully we can add to this list in the future. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching.